Hello and welcome to The Purpose Pursuit, a podcast with me, Hannah Miller. It is great to be back with you. Hello and welcome if this is your first time listening, and welcome back if you've been a friend for a while. Today's episode is a different one. We are doing a Q&A. I love listening to Q&A podcasts, and we thought we'd have a go ourselves. So we asked you to send in your questions. They didn't come to me. They went to an email that was managed by somebody else, and also people sent their DMs to me as well. So these questions have been collected and written onto some pieces of paper, and I haven't seen any of them. I haven't seen anything. I've had no preparation. So these are my top of mind thoughts on everything that have been sent through. So I have no idea where this is going to go. So this could be slightly dangerous. But let's get going. Hopefully this will be useful and will feel live and feel like I'm responding to things that are going on for people right now. Okay, so question number 1. Describe your dream weekend. I think it depends like how tired I am as to what my dream weekend would be. A current dream weekend would be cozying up and feeling like I haven't got a long to-do list of things to do. It would be being with my husband and my kids and some friends as well, with great food, a lovely walk with the dog, getting outdoors, playing some games, having a chat, that kind of thing will do me just fine. Or it would be a spa, that would be another dream. Or it would be somewhere sunny, I think, or somewhere beautiful. But mainly it's about the people for me, I think. And I think it feels really dreamy when you feel you can properly disconnect. When you feel like I'm not thinking about all the things I should be doing or have to do or haven't been done. And you can just go, this is proper chill. And for me, that's normally when I'm not at home, unfortunately, even though I do love my home and I'm very grateful for it. So that's my dream weekend. People, beautiful things, and a good old walk. Okay. Best piece of parenting advice that I have to give other people. Well, a piece of parenting advice. I think a couple of things maybe would be try to see the long range picture when you're in those difficult moments right then. When you are feeling like this feels like a big deal. I think one of the things I've really tried to do, not always very well, is to think, how important will this be after today? And I think another one is to realise that our role is to prepare them to live full adult lives. And that involves little letting goes all the time and trusting them to land on their own 2 feet, even when you want to step in and sort everything out for them. The goal is for them to live happily and independently from us. And I guess the other thing that's been massively important for me is knowing when to call a bit of time out and having some space, and not to keep going at something when you need to step back, and realising your children, if you have more than one, are really different from each other and they need different things from you in order to flourish. So those are a few parenting pieces of advice for me. I also, like, if you're in the baby stage, my big advice there is try and build a bit of routine if it works for you. In fact, I don't even know whether I want to give that advice. For some people, they hate routine, so maybe that isn't helpful. But routine massively helped me with my baby and meant that we were able to get ourselves up and about and doing other things. But actually, I'm kind of going to retract that, because I do think for some people, routine can feel really suffocating and isn't what they want at all. So you do you. Right. What does it mean to live a life of purpose? That is a massive question. Like, it's a really good question. But I think what I would come to here is to think about a life of purpose means doing things and living in a way that enables you to be leaning into the unique way that you have been made. Living a life of purpose means living a life that is good for you and gives you that sense of human flourishing, but also is good for the people around you and the wider world. I think purpose can only work if it has a bit more of an overflow than just what works really nicely for me. Purpose is this idea of, who have I been made to be? How do I live a life that represents that, and how do I give back in a wider way? That's what purpose is. I think if you've ever come across the whole thing of ikigai is about what we're good at, what we can be paid for, what we love to do, and what the world needs. And when we get all of those things in place, that's a eludes that idea of purpose. I just love thinking about the fact that every single one of us has been made uniquely. There is nobody quite like you or me. And I think purpose is about pursuing that idea of getting closer and closer to that feeling. I love talking about purpose. It's why I wrote a course called The Purpose Pursuit. It's why the podcast is called The Purpose Pursuit, but not because I think purpose is an airy-fairy thing for just a select few. Every single person has been made to have purpose. Every single one of us has purpose and meaning. And the most important thing is to think, your purpose is not going to look like somebody else's. It's not something that's for the select few who have elite privileges. It's for every single person. And that is about understanding our gifts and talents and putting them to great use over our lifetime. So for me, that's purpose, living a whole and full life that benefits not just me, but more than me. How do you celebrate well without success? How do you celebrate well without excesses? How do you stick to commitments and still have fun? Oh, this is about drinking. Interesting. It's a really interesting question. It's really interesting when you get these questions when you have absolutely no idea what the context is for people as to what's prompted the question. And it's totally not something I expected to see. So you can see, this is live and shows you that I did not know this question was in here. So I think what this person, whoever's asked this, maybe they know that I choose to not really drink. And then maybe they're wondering, how do I go out and enjoy situations when everyone else is doing that and I don't? Well, there's a whole bigger question here, isn't there? There are so many people who are, for all sorts of different reasons, deciding to not have alcohol as such a big part of their life. Some people, maybe it's because they know it's had an unhealthy place in their life, or it's had an unhealthy place in the life of somebody they love. Then you've got health reasons, just in terms of what we now know about alcohol and what it does to us, and probably would never have quite the level of freedom with alcohol if we knew then what we know now. So that doesn't mean I don't drink at all, because actually I do, although there are lots of people in my life, including extended family members, who've made the decision to say actually they don't want to drink at all for a whole variety of reasons, which I fully respect. I think there's a really interesting question here, that having been somebody who has had plenty excess with wine in the past, it does give you a little bit more freedom in terms of inhibition and, just the getting involved in stuff and having a lot of fun. But I kind of got to a place where I thought, I don't want to need this kind of thing in order to have fun. I don't want to feel the need to have that in my life in order to feel like this is what makes a good time. And most people will wake up the next day and think, and now I feel really, really rough, and actually I've ruined my whole weekend. In fact, I read something the other day. It said somebody was talking about the fact that they'd made a decision to be fully sober. They were in their 40s, and they said, I have never once regretted drinking less. And I really think I agree with that. So sometimes it helps to have a really clear line in the sand as to what your line is. And if you say, actually, I have one drink or I have two drinks and that's what I have, that can be in terms of the part of the question which says, how do you stick to commitments and still have fun? I think the commitment can be, what is my commitment that I'm going to stick to? And I just think there's a deeper question here around, why is this the measure of having fun? What other measures of fun can we be using? How do we be authentically who we are and find that space of not being too worried what people think of us, even if we haven't had loads to drink? And I do love to celebrate and I love having fun. And I guess I just have decided that life is too short for me to worry too much about how, what other people think, and I'm just going to be me and have fun and enjoy that. And if that's not what everybody likes or enjoys, then that's up to them. I mean, obviously this is a really interesting question and people come to different conclusions, and you absolutely are free to come to your own, but I'm answering this question because I've been asked it. So for me, and by the way, I love a fake gin and tonic. So often when I just feel like I'd like a little special drink, I often have a non-alcoholic gin and tonic. It makes me feel like I've had something that is a little bit special. And you'll often see me with that. And I like to tell everyone this is not gin, just because it looks like I could have a bit of a gin habit. Okay, next question. Tips on how to ask for help. Well, I think it's really important that we learn to do this better. I think some of us are really rubbish at asking for help. And again, like the last question, I would like to ask whoever's asked that question to spend a bit of time thinking about why they don't like asking for help. What is driving a behaviour to think that I need to be totally self-sufficient? Is it because we don't want to be a bother? Is it because we don't feel we're important enough? Is it because we have this inner sort of message that we tell ourselves, which is, unless I can do it myself, it's not good enough, or I'm not being good enough, or I shouldn't need help? I think my sister is one of these people who rarely asks for help, and you literally would have to tie her arms behind her back and make her have help, because she's very much like, it's fine, I can do it, I can get on with it. And I actually think sometimes I can be a bit like that, but I think she's worse if she's listening, asking for help. Maybe it's because she's the big sister. She feels she's a bit more like that. But I do think we need to think about, why don't we like to ask for help? Why do we feel like we should be able to do everything? In terms of asking for help and tips on doing that, I think maybe we've got to take the risk and think the worst somebody can do is to say they're not willing to help. Like, that is the worst that can happen. And it involves us being a little bit vulnerable or honest and say, I'm wondering, I've been thinking about everything that's got to be done for this, and I was just wondering whether you might step up and do this, or say, I've made a list of all the stuff that's got to happen. I wondered if you might take a couple of things off here. And I think it depends whether we're talking about personal life and our family and our spouse, or whether we're talking about asking for help at work. If we're talking about asking for help at work, then I just honestly think ask. Absolutely ask. Work is meant to be a place where we just say, actually, can I pick your brains on this? I think if you know your colleagues' strengths and you know who they are, I would absolutely lean into that. And I would be choosing colleagues that I think this is in their field of interest. This is what they're good at. And I think I would say to that person, you know, I know this is something that you're really good at, and I would really love your help with this, your guidance with this. And I would probably start with that and say, I know you've got some skills and expertise that I would love to tap into. If it's in your personal life, I think it's coming up with a conversation with whoever it is you need to ask help with, and being honest about the fact that you are doing more than you would like to be. And have a conversation together around what might that strategy look like. I read something the other day about a couple where they had like a shared note where they just dumped everything that was like mental load list, all the bits and bobs that needed to be done. And this couple had just made a decision to put it all in this shared note. And even though one of the couple had made most of the list, it was something where the other person in the couple could take things off that list without having to keep going back and saying, what can I do to help? Because I think one of the challenges we have is that when we've got loads of things on our mind, we've got loads of things to do, and someone says, let me help, we don't even know how to ask, what to even give that person, or we feel like we can't see the wood for the trees. And sometimes I'll be like this with Sam, and I'll say, just let me get on with it. I just want to get on with it. When actually there are things that don't need to be me. But even the mental load of thinking about what I'm not going to do can be too much. So maybe having something in place where you try to strategize around that, so there are things that can be taken off the list. And I think you just have to have review conversations. Like, there are things that Sam does now that I used to do that are now his responsibility, and he's taken that off my list. So asking for help is, first of all, why do we struggle with it? And second of all, it's about going for it and creating strategies so that you can not have to keep asking for help, but have some things in place that help you to share that load a little bit more. I have to say, I have definitely found this really quite difficult myself, but in more recent years, I think I've got a little bit better at saying, can I ask for this help? And do you know what? If you don't get it, you don't get it. But if you don't ask, then you're not giving somebody the opportunity to help you. So I hope that helps a little bit. When did you know Sam was the one for you? That's a funny question. Gosh. Well, it's a bit of a funny story. I first met Sam when I was about 11. We happened to be at Drayton Manor at the same time with some other people that knew both of us. We did not know each other. And I remember meeting him that day, and just as like a 10, 11-year-old, totally swooning over him. And I remember going on the school bus the next day and telling my friends about this boy. who I'd met. Then we didn't really see each other for years. So obviously that is not when I knew he was the one, even though I did think he was lovely at that time. I actually feel like I knew very, very quickly, and it's hard with, obviously I'm saying that retrospectively in that we're married. So people might feel like that, and then it turns out to not be that they were correct, but I just felt very, very quickly. But I don't know whether that is a measure that anybody else should go by, because I think some people are much more by nature, again, going back to the personality thing, slow burn individuals where they consider things and they're not as heart-led, and something has to kind of feel right over time. But I think I felt like I was all in about the first 2 weeks, and this was it. And it turned out to be true. We've been married for 25 years so far. And I think it's not about somebody being perfect or you being perfect. It's about, actually, I want to spend the rest of my life making this work with this individual. They're safe, they're good for me, they're my best friend. Sam was lots of things that nobody had really been brilliant at being up until that point in my life, and he was the things that I knew I needed to help me grow. I think I knew that he was somebody who would challenge me to be better at being me. He would always put me first, and be an amazing father to some future children that didn't exist at the time. So it's a tricky one, because I do think, again, like, people are really different and how they work this stuff out. I know Sam had almost like a little bit of a he wrote some stuff down and tried to work out, he was trying to almost analyse the decision of whether I was the right one, and just knew in the end he had to follow his heart and approach it in a different way, whereas I'm just not that kind of person. I'm a bit gung-ho, all in, and then I'm yours for life. Tips for making time for friends in the busyness of life. I think this is a really, really good one. And I'm actually going to do an episode on friendship coming up in the new year, later in the new year. I think that making time for friends in the busyness of life is so, so difficult. I have tried to find ways of finding time with friends in between moments. So I haven't got loads of evenings with stuff that's going on with my kids, and I'd like a little bit more, really, but I don't have loads of evenings at the moment. But I do walk my dog, and I do have friends that come and walk the dog with me, because that is something that's got to happen. And I've got other friends that are like, actually, I can make this time of day work. So we might not be spending an evening together, but we might spend an hour together walking the dog and having a chat and catching up. I think you have to be planned and strategic about how much somebody in the friendship has to be proactive and make this stuff happen. I think I said earlier on the podcast that some old friends of mine from uni, we've been trying to get together for the weekend. We live in different parts of the not just the country but the world. We are still trying to find that date. We were determined it was going to happen in 2024, but we are trying. But aligning everyone's diaries can be really hard. And I think that as much as we want to be spontaneous individuals, the reality is the older you get, spontaneity is harder to do things that are really important. So somebody has to say, right, what rhythm can we find? Laura was telling me that her dad every month, I think she said it was like the first Friday of every month, it doesn't really matter, but they made a commitment, her dad and his friends, that every Friday, the first Friday of the month, not every Friday, they would meet together, and whoever could make it, they'd have curry together and they'd have an evening together. So they kind of put a rhythm in and said, this is what we're going to do. And obviously not everybody could make it every month, but that was in place as a priority, and other things fitted around it. And I do think we can find the time. We've just got to be proactive. We've probably got to not think we're going to find time magically, and that we're going to have to be a little bit more strategic about it. I also think if you're in the children phase of life, children shouldn't feel that everything revolves around them. And my sister has said that to me before, and I think it's really important that they are absolutely central and their needs come absolutely first, especially when they're little. But that doesn't mean that they should have every single bit of our time. I don't think that's good for them, and I don't think that's good for us. So actually it's important for our friends, our children, to know I need to see my friends too, and explaining that to them and how important that is too. Hi Hannah, I'm year 3 in, pursuing a project and a dream of mine. How long do I really give it and stick at it for before pulling the plug? Okay, well done for being 3 years in. That is really brilliant. Often new ventures are going to fail within the first 5 years. And by fail, I want to use that word in a way that doesn't make us all go, oh my gosh, failure. Okay. Failure just might mean it just doesn't look like we thought it was going to. And we've got to get more comfortable with failing forward. This idea of, okay, that didn't work out as I thought it was going to. I'm going to pick myself up and take the lessons I've learned and move on. That doesn't mean this is what's going on here. Again, there's not a lot of context here. I would encourage this person to get some support. If you have not got a mentor yet in what you're doing, find one. It's absolutely crucial to have somebody or people who you can bounce on who are further down the line, even if they're in a different space to you. That has been a critical reason that we've made it to nearly 10 years here at my business, is having people that know a shed load more than me, who at different waypoints have been able to help me see what to do. It is so difficult at times to see the wood for the trees with your own project. You're so committed, you're so invested, you're so emotionally tied that actually making the right or best decisions can be really difficult for us to do. Especially as well if you're, I don't know who this person is, but if you have a family or you feel like what your work is doing is like an extension of your own purpose, an extension of really important work, but it's also providing for your family. Those kind of decisions can be really difficult to make unless you're incredibly self-assured. And I've always found that really hard, to separate myself and my family from the decisions I'm making as a businesswoman. Gosh, do you know what? It's even really weird to say the word businesswoman, and I've never said that before in my life. How funny. But I think it's not about how long do you keep going for. I think you probably need to think about some measures of success. So if you don't know where you need it to be, then you don't know how long to go for. So if you're 3 years in, what does it need to look like by year 5 in order for you to keep going? And if it's not there, are you going to have the confidence and courage to say, right, it's time for something different? And not feel that is any sort of representation of what you've done, because actually loads of things don't work out, or don't work out like we thought we would. I don't know whether I'm going to be doing this forever. I don't know how long this is going to go on for, or when things might not look the way I thought it would. But if you don't know what the measures are, you can't know when to stop. And we don't want the measure to just be, oh my gosh, everything has just fell apart around my ears, so now I've got to stop. We want to have more decisive, forward-thinking ones that we think, actually, this hasn't got the momentum I need it to. Certain things haven't come to pass that I thought would, and now it's time to step away or to shift. But I do think going through that process with some people who are wiser, more experienced, could be really, really helpful. And if it's a dream of yours, and again, this kind of depends on you as a person and how sort of committed, or a sense of like, I really want to see this through, it feels. For some people, it can feel such an extension of their purpose or calling, to use that word as well, that actually it's worth sticking at it for longer than what might make sense on paper. But not at the expense of your mental health, your well-being. At some point we have to think, right, how do we look at this differently? And sometimes it's not either or. It's not necessarily pull the plug or everything's going really well, or what does it look like to shift a bit? So I definitely think there's some talking and some conversations for this person to have. I would love to talk to you if I could. What's your favourite colour and why? I don't know. I like bright blue, like royal blue. I like creamy beigey colours, and I like black. Black isn't a colour, I don't think. I don't know if I have a favourite colour, you know. Is that a sad thing? I'm not sure I do. I do like tealy colours and bluey colours, but I just don't know if I really have a favourite colour. I like this beigey colour on this jumper. Rubbish answer. How do you find moments of joy? Did you hear that sigh? How do you find moments of joy in hardship without slipping into toxic positivity? If you don't know what toxic positivity is, it's when we do not allow ourselves to fully embrace the challenges of life, or for other people, we are trying to pull them on too quickly to seeing the good. Or we think that actually, unless things are good or positive, we are somehow living a life that's not healthy or blessed or good. And this idea of toxic positivity is everything should be good and everything should be fine and everything is funny and we should always always be looking for the good. And toxic positivity is really in an environment where we don't allow ourselves to push towards more difficult feelings. And there are some people who, when they're having really difficult feelings, they will go all in with the difficult feelings and they can't see any good. And there are other people who don't allow themselves to go near the reality of the challenges they're facing. And somewhere in between both of those spaces is probably this concept of finding joy in hardship. And sometimes there's an element, I think, of in my own life, there is, I feel things and I will allow myself to feel things and I will cry and I will say it's hard and I will do all of that work. I am not going to apologize for that. It is healthy for me to do that. It is not healthy for me to do that and then refuse to move on from that space or examine the rest of my life or consider what else is going on that's better or good. I think there are principles, even in the hardest of times, where we can try. I'm not talking about seasons of immediate grief. So can we just put that to one side for a minute? But other seasons of hardship or difficulty, let's say you're in a bit of a slog and work is really difficult at the moment. Or maybe you've got something going on like you're trying to buy a house and it keeps falling through. Things that are difficult and really big, but not so much the major grief of life, but tough stuff, which most of us have either just come through or about to go into or are experiencing right now. Having a way of looking for the things to be grateful for and thankful for doesn't need to be toxic. Having a way to think, actually, do you know what, today was really difficult, but this happened, is not a toxic thing to do. I broke down yesterday and was driving quite a long way to work and somehow managed to get home and get in the other car and then drive again and get there on time. And the thing that I was grateful for yesterday was the fact that I got there on time. And so that was a small thing, but actually I try to keep a tally every day of something that demonstrates goodness in my life. And that's something I want to try and keep up, regardless of the day that I'm in, and regardless how difficult it is, because there are things for us to look for that is goodness and things to be grateful for. And actually some people who've experienced some of the hardest things in life, if you read the work of Viktor Frankl or Corrie ten Boom, if you read their books, they have experienced extreme hardship. They've had huge loss, and yet they have a perspective that has enabled them to not lose sight of actually the goodness in life and the goodness in who they are and the things around them. And that doesn't mean they have pretended that it's not awful. That is what toxic positivity is. So for me, it's a bit of a and yet or a but at the end of what we're saying. Now, I think sometimes I do slip into toxic positivity, especially with my kids, where I would be too quick to say, yes, but at least this, but at least that. And what I'm trying to do is to give them a bigger picture. But I think sometimes it's okay to just say, yeah, I can tell this is really rubbish for you right now, and leave it at that. And sometimes it can be just a case of actually it's okay to just show that love and support to somebody or to yourself and leave it at that, by either not going completely into the doldrums or trying to make good. But on the bigger picture, there are things that we can do, like habits of gratitude. And I don't just mean platitudes where we just say, oh, I'm so lucky that I've got air in my lungs, but actually thinking about what is it about today that is good, inherently good, that I can be grateful for. If you could only eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be? Something involving cheese and bread, probably. Yeah. Although I cooked for the first time this week, Marry Me Chicken. If you've not ever cooked that, Google it. Found it on the Taming Twins website. Shout out to her. I did the slow cooker version, and I'm telling you, crowd pleasing. Everyone loved it. I was very proud of myself. So at the moment, I'd have that. But I love cheese. I love bread. They're my go-to items. I love Jason's sourdough as well at the moment, having a whole Jason sourdough thing. So yeah, not great cheese and bread really, is it? But that's probably the honest answer. Cheese, bread, and I adore tomatoes so much. So cheese, bread, tomato would be a divine something or other combination for me. Very simple me, very easily pleased. What do you do when you love the job you're in, but there is absolutely no room for progression? Absolutely no room for progression. Again, my curious mind is like, I want to talk to this person and find out what that means. What do you mean there's no room for progression? Is there no room for progression in terms of pay? Is there no room for progression in terms of promotion? Is there no room for progression in terms of being challenged in the role that you're in? So I find it hard to think there could be no room for any type of progression. And I think this is one of the things I was talking about in another podcast I've recorded around when is it time to move on. It could be what this person's talking about here is they've come to the top of something, or there is no challenge anymore. Maybe there is a sideways move that you can take. Maybe there is maybe there is something that you need to explore, which is tangential rather than completely different. Or maybe there's a conversation that you need to have. Maybe there's something to think about. What does progression look like for you? Like, what is it that's in this question? Whoever's asked this question, what is it that is dissatisfied here? And what do you consider progression to be? Is it important to you that you progress? Or is it important to other people that you progress? So I think I'd want to explore here whether actually, if you really love it, what's the problem? Maybe you don't really love it because you're asking this question and there's something more that you're looking for. And there's elements that you love, but you're ready for a new challenge. So I'm kind of diagnosing here a little bit to say, well, what are you really saying here? You're telling me you love it, but you're telling me there's no progression. So maybe you like it and don't love it. Or maybe you really don't mind about the progression thing and you need to make your peace with that. Again, I would love to talk to this person a little bit more and find out what's going on. And the last question is, give a couple of your New Year's resolutions. Working on these. You know, when you have to say something out loud and then you think everyone's going to know and then you've got to stick to it. I feel like my own personal health is a massive focus for next year. I've had a bad back this year and that has really affected me in terms of all sorts of health habits. And I kind of am limping towards thinking, into the end of the new year, to think about the new year and think, what does it look like in the new year? You know how it's so silly. And I know really you can start afresh any day of the year, but there is something about a new year and thinking, right, clean slate. It's a classic. Health is a classic one. But I think for me, that is something that is really important for me next year that I focus on. I definitely want to do better with that. I also want to work on getting a few more things in the diary next year that are really fun. This year has had a lot of stuff going on in the wider family, which has meant that lots of things have been on pause. So next year I'm excited to kind of put some plans in place that give us some adventure and all the rest of it. And so, a big one for me is definitely around health and looking after myself and doing stretching every day. I'd love to have a streak where I've done some level of stretching every single day. So I'll come back to that one at the end of 2025 and let you know how I've got on. I'm still forming this. If you're thinking about it, sometimes I don't think January the 1st is the very best day to start New Year's resolutions. If you are past that point and you think I started some resolutions on the 1st and it's already gone a bit wrong, I would encourage you to think about mid-Jan or later Jan as a better starting point than the 1st of Jan. We are not ready on January the 1st to go gung-ho. I definitely never am, and I don't think most people are. So I wonder whether it's about using that beginning of January as a bit of a planning phase and then going gung-ho a little bit later. But I love the idea of bringing a couple of streaks into my life where I do something repeatedly, so encourages me to keep going and not dropping the streak. Some people do some amazing things. Like I heard that Martin Lewis, who's the money saving expert, has ran 5k every day for something like, I don't know, I'm making this up now, but like 3 years. How does he do that? Like, is he ever ill? Does he ever have a day where, I definitely couldn't do that. And I think it's amazing that he can, because he's probably busier than me. Anyway, I'm thinking about a streak which is much more manageable than that. So those are all the questions. Those are some really good ones. I definitely think sometimes, understanding context is important when we're thinking about some of these bigger questions, but there's always something underneath the question, which is, well, what is motivating this question in the first place? And if you're thinking about something for your own life and you've been listening to this Q&A, asking yourself the why behind the question that you're asking, or what's motivating that, can really help us get past the actual scenario into what the actual issue is. I hope you found this interesting. We'll do another Q&A again. Thank you for these brilliant questions, and I hope it's helped you whether you ask the question or whether you're just listening in. Bye-bye for now.